Hello there, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and community. Welcome to episode 20 of Web and Beyond Cast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about franchising again. I have back with me Faizun Kamal from the Franchise Consulting Company. And as you know, franchising is a form of small business ownership that really doesn't get a lot of love in the economic development space. And so I wanted to just do this series with Faizun so we could get a little bit more understanding of what it looks like. In this episode, what we're going to talk about is the idea of Faizun's 6-step process for picking the perfect fit franchise. Say that 3 times fast. But for those of you who do not know Faizun, I would highly recommend that you snap back to our first episode, I believe it was episode 15 or so, where we talked about that, about her process of thinking about franchising as a small business owner. A little bit about Faizun, though. Faizun is a nationally renowned public speaker and career strategist. As CEO of the Franchise Pros in partnership with a franchise consulting company, Faizun coaches people nationwide on making the transition from employee to entrepreneur. And so with that, welcome to Web and Beyond Cast, Faizun.
Fantastic, Ray. It's a delight to be here with you again, my friend. Wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. So I know that you have the 6-step process and you are the expert on the process. And so I want you to walk us maybe through maybe what the steps are, and then let's dig into some of the particulars that will help someone who is thinking about franchising really get into the process and understand what is necessary to go from zero to owning a franchise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ray, one of the things, my friend, that I find in the years that I've been doing this is why most people know what a franchise is because they see them everywhere. When you start to dig, however, a little bit deeper than that, most people get stumped and they say, well, I don't really know what a franchise does or the way it operates. And most certainly, when I'm speaking with someone who is looking to buy a franchise for themselves, the question becomes, what do I do? Are there steps that I follow? Do I have to do this all on my own? Is there to use the phrase, is there a method to the madness? And the beautiful thing here, Ray, and frankly, this is one of the things, my friend, that I love so much about this industry. And there are quite a few things, but this one thing in that when I work with someone who does not have that background in franchise ownership, they may never have owned a business in their lives before. This looks like a big, tall, scary mountain to them, and they don't quite know how to begin that ascent. And in my book, as you rightly stated, I've broken it down into bite-sized pieces. So if you're looking at the elephant and you're saying, I want to eat that elephant, well, you can't just gulp the whole animal down. You have to start biting it off in little chunk-sized pieces. And that's what we do. It's a very simple process, Ray, but it's a very effective process. I say to my clients, this process only works if you work it. Otherwise, it doesn't. In terms of the first step, it really begins with, the very famous phrase, know thyself.
Absolutely.
From the ancient Greeks, right? When someone first comes to me, Ray, it's really a simple conversation. So if you came to me and said, Faizun, I've been thinking about starting a franchise, but I have no idea where to begin. My first question to you is not going to be about a franchise. It's instead going to be, oh, that's interesting, Ray. Well, tell me a little bit about you. What do you do? What have you done in the last 10, 15 years of your career? What industry have you been in? So, in the work that you currently do, Ray, give me a sense of what does a day in the life of Ray look like? And in these questions, Ray, what I'm trying to pull out, what I'm trying to ascertain is what kind of skill sets does this particular person come to the table with? You might say, Faizun, I have been the vice president of marketing for ABC company for the last 15 years. And I have a small team of people that I manage. And there are these discrete marketing projects that I run for my company, and I manage them from start to finish. In just those few things that you've shared with me, Ray, I'm able to pull out a couple of things. One, if you're managing a team of people, you're probably very good interpersonally. You might have some skill sets in and around hiring and firing. You might be, don't know this, you might be good at mentoring others, helping them grow. You've already told me you have a background in marketing. That tells me something. You might have said, "Oh, I manage a bit of a P&L. It's about $50 million for the company, and I manage that on a yearly basis." Again, what that tells me is operationally, you probably have some skill sets there. So in that first conversation, it's really me trying to pull out and understand why at this point in your life and career are you thinking about starting a business?
And are you usually shocked by people, some of the realizations? Not you. Are people usually shocked by some of the realizations that of you asking them these questions and maybe potentially realizing that they have skill sets they didn't have before that translate better
Oh
for
my
franchise?
gosh, Ray. All the time, my friend. Probably one of the biggest questions I get asked is, I have a background in ABC. Is there anything out there for someone like me? Right? It's because they have only known that thing and they've done that thing for many, many years and they haven't looked beyond that. And I will typically laugh and say, I don't know yet, but in all likelihood, probably there is. The beautiful thing, Ray, with a franchise is, you know, when you contrast what all of us have gone through when we were employees. So you're in a job and then you're thinking about making a move and you look at some job description of a job that you want to get into, and you look at the 10 things that the job description lists out, and you say to yourself, oh, 7 of these I can do quite well. 2 of them, I'm sure I can figure it out, and the one thing, but I'm sure I'll be able to do it when I get into the position. My point is, as employees, we try to force fit ourselves into what the job requires of us. In a franchise, my friend, there is no force fitting. The franchise is what it is, and it requires an individual with a certain skill set. If you have the skill set, and this is where the way I liken it, Ray, is in a job situation, here's your employer, potential employer, this is you. It's not a level playing field by any means. When you look at franchises, however, it's very much like this. The same way that you as a client are evaluating potential opportunities, the brands are similarly looking at you to try and figure out and say, would Ray be a top performing franchisee for us if he were to enter our system? So step one is we conduct what we call your personal franchise analysis, getting a baseline of who you are, what you're about, what are your strengths, what are your blind spots, what are the things you like to do, Ray? What are some things you would rather get your tooth pulled out without lidocaine than do those things? And we all have them, right? You laugh, we all have them. Once I start to get that sense of who you are, now I feel much more comfortable saying, okay, Ray, yeah, potentially there might be some opportunities that are a fantastic fit for you. I don't know that yet, but I'm starting to get that sense.
So after that introspection, that analysis of the individual, and potentially sometimes it's a couple, right, husband and wife, or maybe potential multiple business partners. Once that analysis is done, what's the next step in the process of determining the franchise
The
fit?
next step, if at this point you still have not been scared away by me, at this point we are going to have you go through a couple of sales and management aptitude assessments. Regardless of what the business is, and I work with several hundred brands, right? Regardless of what the business is, you have to come to the table with some background, some skill set in management and a little bit in sales. Those two you can't run away from. So I try to get a sense of what those skill sets might be like. That again gives me that really robust baseline that I'm looking for.
So not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you then get a sense that you have to send people kind of off to get a little bit of that training? Do people sometimes go through the franchise analysis, get into the business model design, and decision making process, and say, oh, you know what, I don't have these skills. Let me go back and find those skills and come back to you
Absolutely.
when I'm ready.
Absolutely. It happens many more times than you might imagine. And, it's not necessarily what they have wanted to hear. But they also understand that franchise ownership it's not an easy thing. Running a business, whether it's a franchise or not a franchise, is not easy. In addition, with a franchise, it can be a pretty sizable investment that you're making. So if you're going to do those two key things, you want to be as prepared as you possibly can be for that. So step two, really, I get the assessments back, and then I will sit down with you, my client, and we are now going to build out what we call, you just referenced it, your personal franchise business model. Your business model is not the same as a business plan, which many of us have heard about. Think of the business model, Ray, as I'm walking into our meeting and I have two paintbrushes and I have a blank canvas in my hand. And through the course of our conversation, I'm going to hand you one of the paintbrushes. Together, through a series of questions that I'm going to ask you to better understand who you are going to help me paint a very detailed picture of what does Ray's perfect fit franchise look like. What are Ray's skill sets? He's already shared those with me in the first step. I take those. What are the things, what are his goals from a franchise? His personal, professional, financial, lifestyle, whatever your goals might be. I want to know those things. And then third, last but not least, even though we are not yet talking about specific brands, what are those specific characteristics of the businesses that you would like your franchise to have? What do I mean by that? You might say, Faizun, I am much more comfortable in a business to business setting than a business to customer setting. I would like a franchise that plays in the B2B space. That's a very specific thing you're telling me. I put that down. You might say, Faizun, I want to hit this really hard in the first couple of years, but after that, I want to start to hire a small team of people so that I can start to take a back seat. Aha, that's a very specific element that you just said to me, Ray. That's what we call a semi-absentee business in the industry, right? So these are the kinds of nuances, and I go through all of these questions with you. I joke with my clients, by the time we're at the end of this second conversation, you're going to get so sick and tired of me because I have asked you so many, many questions. But that would be step two, building your franchise business model.
And so then we go into the next step, which seems to be kind of a two-parter. Three and four seem to be connected very much together. What does that look like for folks when they are going into the process? What is step 3 and 4, and how does that work for folks to kind of get through those stages and validating and doing your due diligence for the franchise?
Wonderful. Once you have finished step 2, the other parts of the process, 3 to 6, Ray, think of that entire process as what we call due diligence. You, the client, are going to go through this educational research process that I'll take you through that we call due diligence, where based on the assessments that I have done of you, of what I think you might be a great fit for, I will present you with typically 3 brands. Three seems to be like Goldilocks porridge, Ray. It's just right. 2 brands are too few and 4 seem to be too many for most people. 3 is that right number where they're just able to manage all of the information that they're being bombarded with, because you're going to get a lot once you begin. In step 3, we begin due diligence with the franchisors. So remember, step 2, I now have your business model. I take your business model and I go into my inventory of brands. There, I start to do that first set of matching. And what do I match? I am looking at those brands that I have in inventory whose business models most closely matches yours. So it's a very intentional step-by-step process, right? This is not, put some blindfolds on and then throw darts in the dark, hope to God it hits the bullseye. That is not what we're doing here.
It's right. It's a Venn diagram. You're overlapping the right parts with the right parts.
I'm going to steal that from you. Yes, very much like a diagram, right? We are trying to figure out what are those overlapping parts, because I don't know that yet about you. That's what we are trying to figure out. So step 3, we begin the due diligence process with the franchisors. I present 3 brands to you. The brands at that point will then reach out to you to begin that conversation. The very simply, Ray, the expectation when you begin this process with me is every week you're expected to do one call with every single one of the brands. So 3 calls. In addition to the 3 calls you'll make with each brand, there's going to be a 4th call that you are going to make with me. This is our weekly touch base. I'm not one of those people, Ray, where I'll give you some brands, shake your hand and say, great meeting you, my friend, and then I disappear and you never hear from me again until at the very end. That defeats the purpose. There is a reason why this industry has been as successful as it has been. And it is because brands are able, with the help of people like me, brands are able to get just the right qualified, just the right skilled people to come into their system as franchisees. So that's essentially what I do every step of the way as I walk you through. So begin that conversation and boom, now you are in what we call due diligence. Every week, the brand will take you through some specific aspect of the business that they want you, the potential franchisee, to learn and understand about.
Fantastic. And so we go through this process of the franchise leading you, and then you get to the flip side of that where you go into what you call the validation process, or what the industry calls the validation process. And so it's kind of like dating. One side is doing a little bit of education, and the other part now is you doing that in the inverse.
Absolutely. So step 4. So step 3, remember, we began due diligence. Step 4 is essentially continuing in the due diligence process, but with certain specific things in the process now that I will have you focus on. There's 2 in particular. 1, it's what you just said. And by the way, I think you know far more about franchising, Ray, than you let me believe. You're using these terms around, you're throwing it around, validation and all that. I love it. Essentially, you're going to get into what I call the heart of the process, and that is validation. Very simply, validation is when you are going to be speaking with existing franchisees of the 3 brands that I have introduced you to. Because think about it. As your franchise coach, I have hundreds of brands I work with. I know about the brands, but I certainly don't know all the nitty-gritty. The brand rep that you are speaking to every week, they certainly know a lot because they work with the brand. But who is in the most perfect position to share with you, Ray, here's what a day in the life of someone running this particular business, here's what it looks like. Here are the challenges you're going to face in the first 12 months of business. Here is the point at which I broke even and I got to profitability. Here are some of the things that I wasn't aware of that I became aware of once I became a franchisee. There's no one better to answer these very granular, visceral questions than the franchisees themselves. One of the things, Ray, I'm going to share with you, think about this. Is there anything else that you are aware of where before you make an investment, whether it's a stock, whether it's a bond, whether it's a whatever, before you make that investment, it allows you, it takes the veil off and says, come inside and take a look at how we work before you decide to make that investment in us. There's nothing else out there in the marketplace that does that. I love that about franchises because, my friend, if you're a homeowner, second only to your mortgage, and sometimes it can be more than your mortgage, investing in a franchise is a sizable financial investment. This is not something I take lightly. If you work with me, I will not let you take it lightly. Again, the point is, there should not be any regrets after you've signed the dotted lines. So before you sign the dotted lines, I want you to go through due diligence in the best, in the most robust, in the most aggressive way possible. So validation. The second thing, as you are wrapping up validation, Ray, is the legal piece. Every franchise, in order to be able to legally sell franchise units around the country, they have to be registered with the Federal Trade Commission, which is our regulatory oversight body. And as part of this process, as part of this requirement, every brand is required to register with the federal government a document called the FDD, or the Franchise Disclosure Document. It is typically 200-300 pages thick. It's a legal document. It is not super duper exciting. I joke with my clients, if you ever have trouble falling asleep at night, cozy right up to the FDD and you will fall asleep just like that. Jokes aside, though, it is one of the most important pieces of this process. And what it does essentially is the FDD is comprised of what we call sections or items, 23 separate sections in the document. And each section of the document walks you through some particular aspect of the brand that, again, you as a potential franchisee, you need to know about. So for example, one of the first sections will talk about who the management team is. Here you are getting ready to invest in this brand, but what are you investing in? Who are the founders? Who's the management team? Do they know what the heck they're doing? You want to know that. You will get into something we called item or section 7. Item 7 is your average investment. It lays out in great detail. Ray, if you want to come on board and join us as a franchisee, you're looking at investing $60,000 to $120,000. It'll give you a range. And it breaks down in great detail, potentially what are all of the items you will need to invest in, whether it's equipment, whether it's vehicles, whether it's materials, whether it's product, right? Depending on what the business is. One of the most important parts in the FDD is what we call item 19. Item 19 is the earnings claim. So when clients come to me, the first question is, can you help me find the right franchise? Question number 2 immediately becomes, can you give me a franchise that helps me make the most amount of money? And what would those look like? And the answer is, I don't know. I can't tell you that. This is part of the intent of due diligence. And item 19 lays out, the brand lays out for you, we have 100 franchisees in the system. Here's how much money the top third of franchisees are making. Here's how much money the middle performing franchisees are making. Here's how much money our lowest performing franchisees are making. They will break that out for you. Why? Again, as you go through the process, Ray, what you are trying to figure out is, okay, Faizun's walked me through these steps. I have a sense of what the business does. I'm starting to feel really good about what the brand requires of its franchisees. I know I have the skill set. I can absolutely do the work. Well, but I'm investing my money in this. I'm looking at growing this business over the next 10 or so years. Don't I want to know how much money I can actually make? Absolutely. That is what part of the FDD does. So we take you through this FDD legal review. The one thing I'll make mention and end out this step, Ray, many clients at this stage get super excited and say, oh my God, Faizun, I think this is the one for me. And I say, time out. We are not going to do anything until you have taken that FDD and you have sat down with a franchise attorney. I want you to know what your rights, roles, and responsibilities are vis-a-vis the brand. I am not an attorney, but I work with some of the best in the country, and I'm happy to do an introduction for you with one of them. So that, in essence, becomes step 4.
And so what you're talking about here is that once you get through validation on that on step 4 and get into the FDD, how many FDDs does a typical client review? It's a 200-page tome of documentation, and it's really good for them to review that in detail with you and by themselves and ask all the questions and then meet with a franchise attorney. How many do you feel like the average client with you reviews?
I have not yet had a client who has looked at more than 5. And this, you raise a very good point, Ray. I think there are a lot of people, they come into this process with the mistaken assumption, Faizun is going to hand me a laundry list of 10, 15 brands. And then I just, run out there and do what I need to do. The intent is not for you to look at as many different kinds of businesses as you can, because it's that becomes a scattershot approach. As I walked you through, it's very intentional. The step 4 builds on step 3, which builds on step 2, right? So it's think of it as a pyramid, and you're going up the pyramid. It's a big mistaken assumption that a lot of people have, where they think Unless I look at 20, 30 businesses, I won't be able to know. That is absolutely not true. Because when you go through due diligence, how many of these FDDs are you actually going to go through in detail? How many can you actually go through, right? So again, it's a very specific process. Think of it as, Ray, when someone begins with me, at the beginning, they're at the mouth of the funnel. Think of a funnel. And as I take them through the process, the funnel keeps narrowing until what we get spit out at the end is that one brand that checks out all of the different things that you want the business to give you.
So I misspoke earlier. I said that was step 5. That we were still in step 4 when we're still reviewing the FDD.
Yeah.
And so then we get on from we feel really confident in this particular brand, and we get into our next step, which is really funding. And what does that process look like for most of your clients as they have now kind of almost wedded themselves to a particular brand?
Wonderful. And it's a little bit of a while I call it step 5, Ray, step 5 actually happens as soon as I introduce you to brands. Here's why. Question number 1 that most clients have: what is the right brand for me? Question number 2, how much money can I make? Question number 3 inevitably becomes, well, Faizun, once I have found the right business for me, how am I going to fund it? I'm not sitting on $1 million cash. It doesn't cost $1 million, but whatever the amount is. My intent when my clients begin working with me is this needs to be a one-stop shop. Why? When I introduced you to brands, Ray, I want you to focus all of your time and energies on investigating those brands, doing the diligence properly. What I don't want you to do is you're doing this with me, but then you are running around like a headless chicken, going to your local bank, doing this, doing that, trying to figure out, oh my gosh, where am I going to line up the money to buy the business? That I don't want you to do. It becomes an exercise in frustration. It becomes counterproductive. Instead, as soon as I introduce you to brands, the 4th introduction, so 3 brands, the 4th introduction I'm going to make for you is going to be with my funding concierge. It's the business model that I have developed over the years, Ray. It's quite a bit different from a lot of other people in the industry. I like to keep everything in-house because my clients appreciate the seamlessness, if you will, where they're not having to go to multiple people for multiple different things. Another reason why I introduce my clients to an attorney. You can go to whoever you would like. They have to be a franchise attorney. They cannot be a real estate attorney. It cannot be your brother-in-law who does, family law, franchise attorney. But again, by keeping these experts in-house, it allows you, the client, to focus on the one thing that you're supposed to do. Focus on understanding the brands. So my funding concierge, who has been in franchise funding probably longer than I have been alive, at least it feels like it, she will essentially walk you through, she will take your specific financials. Everyone's financial situation is different. She will sit down with you and do a very detailed deep dive into, okay, Ray, you're sharing with me, here's how much liquidity you have. Here's what your net worth looks like. Looks like you own a home. Here's how much equity you have. Looks like over time you invested this much in a retirement account. Whatever your specifics are, she takes all of that and then she comes up with a funding plan that says, Ray, based on your specifics, these 3 seem to be the top 3 ways in which to fund your business once you and Faizun have found it. And it could be, number 1, SBA loan. Number 2, a retirement account rollover. Number 3, right? And she goes down through that. As I walk you through the process, Ray, you will be working with her hand in glove, the same way you're working with me. And as we go through, she's helping you figure out where you say, okay, it sounds like this may be the best option for me. And you start to put together the packaging, the documentation required around that as we are moving through your due diligence at the same time. So that would be step 5.
Fantastic. And then we close out the whole process, and there is this wonderful day you spend with your franchise. What does that look like? What does step 6 look like for potential franchise owners?
So step 6, you've done the bulk of the due diligence. And typically at this point, Ray, my clients will have one brand that has risen to the top. They are really starting to feel good about the brand, and the brand is really starting to fall in love with you. At that point, they will reach out to me. The brands will reach out to me and they will say, Faizun, we have absolutely loved getting to know Ray. We feel confident that he's going to be a really great fit with our system and who we are looking for. We would like to extend an invitation for him to come meet us, meet the entire corporate team at our headquarters in what's known as a discovery day. That's what it's called. It's a discovery day. Discovery day is that very last step in the process, right? By the time a client goes to discovery day, they're probably 95% certain this is the brand that they're going to go with. Um, that 5% is, I call it life, that you're never going to know 100% about everything, right? But this is the step where you go in and you look into the eyeballs of the people who are going to become your business family, hopefully for a very long time. What are they like? Are they great to work with? Are they professional? What kind of resources does the brand have at the corporate headquarters for me when I come on board? What type of robust systems and support are they going to provide for me? So it's that last stage in the process. It's typically a day, sometimes a couple days. Since COVID, most discovery days have become virtual, so you're doing it online. Um, some brands are slowly starting to ease and go back into in person, but traditionally they have been in person, where they will ask you to come over to the corporate headquarters. You come back from discovery day, it's go, no go time. So this is where we sit down, and you share with me if you think this is the brand for you, why you think it's the brand for you, or you come back and you say, oh, Faizun, I really thought it was the brand for me, but based on these reasons, I feel like it might not be. And that sort of becomes the end point, the last step in the process.
Fantastic. So I'm so curious about some of the pieces here with regard to the whole process. So I want to kind of review this for everyone watching and listening. So the 6-step process is conducting the personal franchise analysis, then developing that business model that you talked about. Due diligence is step 3 and 4, where due diligence with the franchises, then due diligence with the franchisees, doing that validation process. Then we go into funding, step 5, and then attending that discovery day and the, as you noted, go or no go decision point process. Now, in your own world, you have this really under lock and key. I mean, you make sure that the potential franchise owner, is really helped at every stage of this process. What are sometimes some of the biggest tripping points people have? Is it funding? Is it deciding on a specific franchise? Once they've gone through this process, no matter how good anybody is life, right? So what are the biggest tripping points people have, and how do you help them overcome that?
That is such a fantastic question, by the way, Ray. Um, I think, my friend, I would have to say the biggest tripping point, bar none, is fear. This is a huge, life changing, hopefully positive, life changing decision, not just for you, but for your family for a very long time to come. Uh, Fear is a natural and inevitable part of the process. It typically rears its ugly head somewhere in the middle, close towards the end, right? And it comes out in the form of doubts. Faizun, I started with you. I was all gung ho. I don't know. Should I be doing this? Should I just go back to corporate America? Right? These doubts come up. In fact, yesterday I was speaking with a client of mine, and this is where she is. And she began the call with me by saying, I feel I'm at a crossroads in the process. And I said, all right, let's talk about it. I think ultimately, Ray, my friend, entrepreneurship is one of those things. You run your own business, so you know this very intimately. Um, in business as in life, there are no guarantees. I will sometimes hear this from clients who will say, I just need to have a guarantee that I'm going to make this kind of money, that this is going to succeed. And I laugh and I say, if that's what you're looking for, then I think I'm the wrong person for you. No one can give you that, right? So I think it's, I mentioned 95%. 95% of the certainty comes because you have conducted the due diligence very aggressively. You've peeked into every little nook and cranny. You've tried to understand the business models. You've tried to understand, what does their ideal franchisee look like, and do I look like them in terms of skill sets? You've done the due diligence. That 5% is what I call the unknowable. It's what involves grace. Here's where a little bit of faith comes in, right? Where you say, I am that confident in myself and in my abilities that even though I will never know 100%, I will still move ahead because I know I can make this work. I can make this successful. So fear, absolutely, fear.
Fantastic, fantastic. So as we close out, I wanted to just give you an opportunity to share anything that you wanted to with folks, and I know that you have a little bit of something that you wanted to give
Yes,
viewers and listeners.
yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I would love to be able to offer your listeners a complimentary copy of my best-selling book. Of course, if they wanted to go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble and buy it from there, they're more than welcome to do so. But I would love to send them a complimentary copy. I think once the episodes go up, Ray, you're going to have my contact information. But for folks, LinkedIn is the best way to find me and connect with me. Email wise, I am at Faizun, Faizun, Faizun at thefranchiseconsultingcompany.com. All small. And folks can always get a hold of me, 443-604-6276. So I welcome folks reaching out. Always love to chat.
Wonderful. You do my job for me. You are so wonderful. Thank you so much for being here on Web and Beyond Cast, Faizun.
So lovely to be with you.
Thank you. All right. So that was Faizun Kamal, and she is with the Faizun, with the Franchise Pros. Go find her and follow her. Links to her social media profiles are in the show notes. And of course, check out her book. As she noted, she's offering a complimentary copy. It's also available on Amazon and elsewhere. The right franchise for you. Escape the 9-to-5, generate wealth, and live life on your terms. And so with that, thank you all for watching and listening to Web and Beyond Cast, where small business comes to learn about marketing and managing on the web and beyond. I'm your host, Ray Sidney Smith. Until next time, here's to your small business success on the web and beyond. Take care, everybody.